Imagine your mother being murdered when you are just 4 years old, then losing your father to alcohol and depression when you are 18. Then imagine you're a writer driven to piece together the details of your parents' two short lives. The result is a searing memoir written by Leah Carroll, who joins us now to discuss. Welcome, Leah. It's so great to have you here, and congratulations on a beautifully written book. I mean, obviously you were so young when you lost your mother. When were you able, as a child, to piece together what had happened to her?
Well, as a child, I really wasn't. So it was really shrouded in secrecy and a little bit of shame. So there was a story that she had died in a car accident, and then later on I was told that she had been murdered, but I really never had any details. So it wasn't really until I was an adult that I started to put the pieces together.
And you really investigated her life as a journalist would have, as a historian, really. You went back to original sources, correct? I mean, because no one could really tell you the full story, is that right?
Yeah, and everybody, it had happened, I was 4, so it was, and it had happened so long ago that I would sort of get the pieces in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And everybody knew a little bit of something, and often their memories were not correct, I found, when going back to the primary sources.
Right.
So for me, going back and seeing these newspaper articles and, law enforcement documents, it was like, it was a nice way to know that this is the truth.
Right.
This is the objective truth.
And there was certainly stuff, I'm sure, that you uncovered that angered you. For instance, one of your mother's murderers was in police protective custody for a while and never really did time for what he did.
No, he never did any time for what he did, and he had actually murdered 2 other people as well and died on his way to skydiving lessons in a car owned by the Providence Police.
Which is so fascinating. Of course, it's a tale. We'll have to read your book to get all the details, but there's a tale involving mafia and drugs and sort of a little bit of the sordid underbelly of Rhode Island, where you grew up. You paint a beautiful picture of Rhode Island. But of course, the bigger character in your book is your father, because you live with him until you're 18, correct? Or more or less.
Yep.
And, also your stepmother plays a big role. Of course, he had his own demons.
Yeah, so he was a Vietnam vet, and he was an alcoholic, and he also struggled with bipolar disorder. But he was incredibly smart and incredibly charismatic and charming, and just filled me with a desire for intellectual creativity. And we read the same books and would go and see the same films, and
Sure.
and he was in some ways almost a little more of a peer than a father.
Yes.
But he was. That's him.
There, yeah.
But he was a really incredible person.
And he also lost his life far too young.
Yes.
And so at what point as a writer did you say to yourself, I want to sit down and write the story, I want to piece together the stories of my parents' lives, which is in many ways my story as well?
Well, that's an interesting point. I think I resisted the idea that it was my story for a long time. And it wasn't until I realized that the binding thing that made these stories connect was me. So I had kind of resisted writing a memoir, and then I realized, oh no, their story is my story, and
Yes.
to tell their story, I have to tell my story.
And now you are doing so well. I mean, we see in your book how you struggled a little bit as a teenager, finding your footing, correct? And now you're doing so well. Are you still in any way haunted by the past, or have you made peace with it?
I think I've really made peace with it. And I think that writing the book helped me to do that. I think knowing everything and finding out everything and doing as much research as I did was really helpful. And I think my parents, especially my dad, would love the idea that there was a book about him and that I wrote it.
Oh, he'd be so proud of you. There's no doubt about that. Well, Leah Carroll, we are so happy to have you here, and your book is fantastic. Thanks so much for coming to talk about it.
Thank you.